Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Veritas Fact Finding Series. And today I have a special guest, Katherine Dudtschak. Katie, good morning.
Hey, welcome everyone, and thank you, Anthony. It's awesome to be here.
We're back on the ground to speak to industry professionals in an unscripted, candid video format to discover how we can make better investment decisions. If you're watching and you like what you hear, give us a like and follow us at veritascorp.com. A quick disclaimer, this broadcast is not to be taken as investment advice, and participants and or employees of the Veritas Group of companies may own securities discussed in this broadcast. And while we love all our guests, and Katie in particular, this session may contain forward-looking statements, investment opinions, and comments that we may not agree with. Now, I'd like to give you a quick introduction. I'm really excited about this debate today. Our conversation's about leadership, but not in a way we usually discuss it. It's about identity, pressure, inclusion, and what it really means to lead when parts of who you are challenge the system you operate in. My guest, Katherine Dudtschak, former CEO of Home Equity Bank and the first transgender CEO of a Canadian chartered bank, is a milestone that made history, but also came with unique pressures and expectations. There's lots to listen to here and lots to learn. Katie, I want to take you back to your early days, your early life. What brought you to where you are? What were the formative signs and things during your early life with your family?
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you, Anthony, for the invite, and it's an honor. It's an honor to be here with you and all of your guests. So, I grew up to newcomers. My parents survived the Second World War. My mother was a child refugee. My father was a Russian prisoner of war during the war. 3 of my grandparents died during the war. My grandmother was severely injured. And ultimately, like many, my mother and father wanted a better life. And they ultimately chose in the mid-50s to leave Germany and come to Canada. And so they brought with them, like many war survivors do, if not all, they brought intergenerational trauma with them. And they wanted a better life, and their dream was to be a farmer. And so my mother and father were mink farmers, of all things.
Wow.
I've worked on every kind of farm you can think of. So I grew up on a mink farm with newcomer parents that survived the horrors of war. And I also struggled at school, whether it's because of the anxiety of a home that, contained intergenerational trauma. I don't know, but I also struggled at school and have come to learn through my later life that I'm likely dyslexic. So you've got this individual that, grows up in this kind of stressful home environment. Money was hard to come by. I struggled in school, yet I knew I wasn't incapable. I knew I wasn't dumb. And, I also had a gender secret. I was equally feminine as I was masculine. I loved the machines. I loved solving problems. And I equally loved beauty and pretty things. And I was drawn both directions, which was also confusing. So like many people, especially those of us in the corporate world, by the time I left teenagehood, I was dead and determined that I was going to prove to the teachers I was smart enough. I was going to prove to my parents I could build a better life than they did. I wanted to prove that I could find the perfect spouse and, have children and have a country home and, and a corporate career.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my learning challenges, I went to community college, not to university initially. So in addition to all of that, I felt I had to be opportunistic. So for the better part of my 37 years at RBC, I took every job that came my way, regardless of where it was in the country or around the world. And if the job involves something that I didn't think people thought I could do, which is
Mm-hmm.
back to proving people you're smart enough and good enough, I took that job. And it worked really well. I kept taking new opportunities to prove my ability. I moved to different communities across Canada. Eventually, I became the CEO of RBC in the Caribbean, leading 19 countries and restructuring a bank after the financial crisis. And it worked. And it worked. And, you know, as we'll talk about, underneath the covers of this materialistically successful corporate career and beautiful family was a growing level of stress and anxiety and exhaustion within me that was taking its toll by the time I hit about 45 years old.
So here you are. It sounds like you love being the underdog. You have to prove something to your parents and to yourself, to your teachers, because they'd always seen that, that you were probably an easy one to pick on because you were awkward, you were different. And so
I had a weird last name, and so they'd make fun of my last name. Exactly.
well, we could talk about that at another for hours. How many side names I've heard for my last name, but importantly, you had built a very successful career at Canada's largest financial institution, and you had built a big a family. You got married. You had four children, right?
Yep.
And so here you are, like thriving, and yet there's some kind of internal conflict. Let's talk about what that is.
Yeah.
What that was like.
Yeah. And so the thing, my first quote, and it's in my book, you can run, but you can't hide. So if there's something innately in you that you're denying, it will either take its toll in the form of mental health, physical health, but it'll haunt you. It'll haunt you until you face it.
Yeah.
And so for me, this little gender secret was something that was always there. It was literally, Anthony, below the waterline. I thought about it every day, but I didn't know what it was. I felt I fit in with the guys because I worked really hard to fit in with the guys. Yet I always felt I was more like the women I worked with. I was more sensitive, more emotional. I wanted to be lighter. I wanted to be playful. I still liked beauty and pretty things. And so it was always there, yet I masked it with being really, really busy, morning,
Right.
noon, and night. And,
That's a common
7
thing.
days. So when your children get older and they don't need you as much, and your marriage matures, and your job becomes intuitive, it doesn't take as many hours to do your job, it becomes more intuitive. These things that you've been suppressing haunt you. And in my case, in around 2015, it was the first time in my career I took a job that I knew intuitively I could do, and it was leading the 25,000 frontline employees of RBC, because I'd grown up in distribution. I had had a strategy background, a risk background, an HR background, and I love human beings. So I love leadership. So I knew I could do it fairly intuitively. And that ultimately, within 2 years of taking that job and what was going on in the world, Caitlyn Jenner, articles being written about gender, this stuff started to come into my awareness in a way that had never happened before. I would go online for years and inquire about different things that I felt, and I felt so horrible. I felt broken. And it all started to break loose when I dropped my oldest daughter off at university, and I saw a poster of someone assigned male at birth, someone looking like a boy wearing a silk blouse and pearls, and it said embrace gender variance. And I thought, oh my God, could the world become so open that I could be me? And within the following 12 months, articles, Caitlyn Jenner, my mother died, my father had died 6 years earlier. Like, this thing got loud. And on August the 25th, 2017, about 12:30 noon, I asked a colleague at lunch who's an expert on all things LGBT.
Yeah.
I said, "What the heck is transgender?" I had no idea. And it sounds really dumb, but I led a really pure corporate life. I built guardrails to protect me on this track. And by the end of that lunch, he had explained to me, that gender is a continuum of feminine and masculine characteristics. It's not about body parts. Explained to me that Caitlyn Jenner felt female on the inside her entire life.
Yeah.
And then I said, yeah, but how can Caitlyn Jenner date girls? And I said, that doesn't make sense to me. And he goes, Katie, who you go to sleep as is your gender, and who you go to sleep with is your sexual orientation.
Yes.
And he goes, Caitlyn Jenner is a lesbian, and you could have pushed me over with a feather. And I immediately had answers to things that I questioned for 50 years. And I went home that night and I started Googling a different way than I had before. And within a couple of days, my anxiety was through the roof. I felt like I had betrayed my spouse. I was already worrying about, my safety and well-being in the world and the well-being of my family. And within 10 days of that lunch, I told my spouse that I think I'm wired female on the inside.
Wow.
And that was the dam breaking. That was the beaver dam was holding back the water.
Can't go back.
You can't hold it. Once it breaks, you can't hold it back.
Once you let it out of the bag. And your spouse was very supportive, from what I understand of our discussion.
Yeah. And, the thing when someone affirms their gender,
Yeah.
everyone around you needs to, you're rewiring yourself. You are going inside your soul and you are tearing down the identity you built and building back more authentic to kind of who you are innately as a human being. I call it essence. I call it soul. I call it essential self. And, that journey takes years. And then your loved ones are also rewiring how they saw you. And at the same time, severe mental health set in for me pretty quickly. And so, my spouse was supportive and we would cry together, in the evenings and on weekends as I struggled my way through what to do about this.
In the meantime, you're still working. No one at work knows everything's going just fine as far as everybody on the outside is watching.
Yeah, well, yes. And eventually people started to wonder, because in order to cope with gender dysphoria, it's helpful to do little things physically to align your inner self with how you present to the world. So, I'd wear skinny jeans, or my hair was starting to get longer, and I'd allowed my body movement to be more fluid because I was such a stiff German banker. And people could see I was changing, but I still living in the world with men, presenting as a male, but they could see it. But it played out over a couple of years before I came out. And my spouse and family and the friends that I brought on the journey with me fairly early, a small group, they didn't understand, yet at the same time, they were loving and patient. And at the same time, they were dealing with their own struggles of, what does this mean for my spouse or my children? So, yes, supportive, beyond supportive. And at the same time, they're on a journey of their own while you're on a journey.
So I want to dig into life in the corporate world, because I think that's really relevant to all those that are paying attention or here today. So you're in any organization, especially large conservative ones like banking, and there'll be people who are uncomfortable, they're skeptical, they're even opposed. So how do you deal with that? And I think this, we can take at the level at which you would have to deal with it, but
Yeah.
even, at the very simple level, we're all faced with situations where, our hair doesn't look right today. We don't
Yeah.
that shirt that we wanted to be ready wasn't ready, so I got to put it on and it doesn't look quite right. You feel uncomfortable. So how do you confront these situations?
Yeah, I'm going to give you hopefully a quick, Anthony, but three-part answer, because I
Good.
didn't fully answer your question earlier. So for 2 years before I came out, like I experienced suicidal ideation. I wanted life to be over. I had a plan. It got
Mhm.
it got really intense.
Because you were afraid of coming out. This is the
I
thing.
was
There's
afraid
a
of being
huge
homeless.
afraid. Making decisions are always hard
Yes,
because the decision requires is a risk of failure. And in this case, the risk of failure is your job, your family, your life as you know it for the first
yes,
40 odd 50 years. And here
yeah,
you are.
exactly. So I was dealing with two truths. If there's a line that we should all remember, two things can be true. I was experiencing a level of inner peace on the gender side. Every step I took to affirm my gender felt very natural to me. I was
Right.
going back to expressing myself the way I did when I was 4 and 5 years old, authentically. Yet at the same time, I was dealing with paralyzing fear of judgment and rejection, and paralyzing fear of hurting my spouse and my children, or hurting RBC. And so I was carrying both. And the odd thing about mental health is we can experience depression, we can experience
Yes.
anxiety. I was at the 97th percentile of anxiety at the time. Yet we
Well,
can still be high functioning in the corporate world, especially if you're operating with 30 years of experience in a job that's intuitive. So I
yeah.
shrunk my hours. I was highly productive from about 8:30 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon. And all I focused on is what mattered. I like all the noise and niceties kind of left, and I trusted people. I gave people autonomy. I trusted my intuition about the job, and I took the meetings that mattered. I didn't take the meetings that didn't matter. Like I narrowed my corporate life and performed well for 8:30 till 3 o'clock every day. And ironically, we achieved record performance during that time because, I empowered and trusted others,
Yeah.
and it worked. And at the same time, I would go see my therapist at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would be in bed at 7 p.m. because I was so depressed and emotionally exhausted and feeling alone in the world. So
And
I
that was a day when you got to work dressed the way I am right here, right? You went to
exactly,
work and you were
and
just dressed like this.
I felt horrible putting my clothes on every morning.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about mental health, is you don't see it on the surface in the corporate world. There may be subtle changes in the person, but there's a deep,
Yeah.
dark part of their life that they're living that they don't let you see. And that certainly was the case for me. So being kind and empathic and slowing down enough to just be to realize and be present to the fact that you don't really know what someone's dealing with in their whole life. So that's kind of the first part. The other is when I came out on June 17th, 2019, I still expected the worst.
This is at a town hall meeting,
Well, this
right?
was on a
You're
video that went out to 80,000 people. And then
recorded, done live.
and that I no, it was done in a studio a few weeks
Oh,
before.
at the RBC studio. Okay. But so you'd already spoken to and prepared the powers that be at the bank.
I told Dave Mackay in February, and I didn't come out till June. I'd never seen
So
myself
I,
fully.
I have to listen. Having dealt with RBC for the last 26 years, 25 years, it is incredible bank, entrepreneurial, open-minded, supportive. I've seen so many great things. Yeah,
Yeah, Dave, I cried in Dave's office for an hour.
sure.
Um, and he's just bringing me Kleenex after Kleenex as I bared my soul to him. And then Helena, the head of HR at the time, goes, "I'm your protector. My job is to protect you." And no one would and she goes, "No one would choose what you're choosing. Like you wouldn't do this if you didn't need to do it to survive."
Yes.
Neil McLaughlin was great. So by the time June came around, I had built a critical path. HR helped me, and I was being very
But it
thoughtful.
was largely kept under wraps.
It was totally under
The
wraps.
rest of the staff, nobody
Right.
knew.
It went board of directors, C-suite, my direct reports, my national leadership team, and then we went to all employees on June 17th. And
Wow.
as loving and kind as my family and friends and colleagues were, I still expected to be homeless.
Yes.
And what I received was the greatest gift a human being can ever receive. And yes, we'll get to your bigger question about dealing with rejection. There were a couple of friends for religious reasons really had a hard time, and I chose to not spend time with those people because it was triggering for me and was not healthy for my mental health. But very little. I received hundreds and thousands of emails. I walked into my first town hall, and the speaker at the town hall, when I walked in, we had security guards because we were worried about me, being hurt. And I walked into the first employee town hall, and there was somebody speaking, but 600 people's eyes were on me at the back of the room. And they changed the agenda, and then they started to introduce me, and then they didn't let him finish. His name's Matt.
This is after you had already done that video, right?
Yeah,
This is
and
the
then
next town hall after the
2 days after,
Right.
and all the eyes were on me as Matt was introducing me.
Right.
And then everybody stood up, and they started clapping, and I started bawling my eyes out.
Sure.
And I started slowly walking to the stage because I was going to do a keynote on business strategy and business performance. And people kept standing in front of me. And, it took me 15 minutes to move to the front of the auditorium in tears. And the only words I could think of were, when I got to the stage, was surprise. And I just said, thank you for your love and for your support. And, within 10 minutes, Anthony, we talked business and we talked strategy and we talked performance, and we got on with, what was important.
At this moment, you were dressed as a woman.
No, I was presenting as a man.
Wow.
People had seen the photo of me when I met Dave Mackay.
Yes.
I was still presenting as a man. I had never seen myself as a woman in the mirror before. I went to New York City after that and met with a consultant, Monica, who I talk about in the book, who was an amazingly affirmative human being. And we did a photo of what I would look like, similar to what I look like today. And the reason I delayed seeing myself in the mirror was I knew that if I looked how I thought I would look, there was no effing going back. And so I delayed it as long as I could. So Here I am, Anthony, with this outpouring of love and support. And then what started to happen is countless people started telling me stories of their own hurt and hardship. Mm-hmm. And I was so naive to think that I was the only one feeling broken. I certainly had senior people on my team that opened up to me about, family struggles that they grew up with. And I had assembled in my mind a knowledge that the people that seem to have gone through the worst
Right.
were the most empathic, resilient, and determined leaders.
Studies show that
It's true. And
over
here
and
we
over
still,
again.
and here we are, we still recruit people based on their university and their job resume, and we don't really get to know the whole human being. So I had hundreds and hundreds of people telling me their hurt and hardship stories from every walk of life, men,
Wow.
women, people in between, people from India, people from China, people from the Caribbean, all of them telling me their hurt and hardship stories. And what occurred to me as a leader of 25,000 was, could you imagine a world where nobody has to bury that story? Could you imagine a world that was kind and empathic towards struggles or towards neurodiversity or towards gender? Could you imagine a world that allowed a human being to bring what I call their visible and invisible dimensions of human uniqueness to business, to humanity, to society? And I said to Dave Mackay at one point, there's like exponential unlocked human potential available to us if we can find a way to let people out of the systematized box that we put them in and allow them to express their emotion and their creativity and their lived experiences. And so I felt, Anthony, that I'd been given a gift of love and kindness, and a gift of insight into the human condition that most people would never get because of my neurodiversity, my intergenerational trauma, living in a man's world and a woman's world, having worked in the Caribbean and like worked on a farm. And I go, like, I have just so much empathy for the world, for humanity. And I made myself a promise. And, over the next year or two, I would meditate. I learned to meditate, and I made myself a promise that I would do everything I can to try to live a life of love and kindness first, and patience and empathy for others. And that I would try to lead not from command and control or hierarchy. I would try my best to suspend ego and fear and shift and to calmness and to kindness and to curiosity and to inclusivity, and be out of empathy for the human journey, but also out of this appreciation that, somebody might be a bank teller, yet they may have a set of lived experiences and they may have an IQ that is as strong as a CEO's is. They just chose a different life.
Yes.
And so no one human being is better than the other. And so I led differently. And and this is the punchline, because I now live from a place of expressing my heart and expressing my love and trying to live from kindness, I don't really get judgment and rejection. I get back what I give to others. And, I'm sure there's people that avoid me because they don't understand or because they were taught differently.
Yep.
But I would say, Anthony, I don't really run into it. I don't really run into, overt judgment and rejection. I choose love. I choose love and kindness. And you generally, for the most part, you get what you give.
That all sink in for a moment. So I take this to sort of things that everyone on the podcast here can learn from in their both day-to-day life, and and especially for leaders. Or look, we're all leading, whether we're leading our children, we're leading our dog, we're leading a staff of 25,000, we're role models to the world and so forth. So I'm thinking, at the time you did all this, it become the you had already achieved some significant success. You had some wealth, you had some structure in your life that you could lean on, and that makes it, I don't want to say easier, but it can, right? The bigger struggle, I think, often not bigger, but a huge struggle comes from those people that don't have any financial means, they can't seek counseling, they can't have access, and now it becomes a big struggle for them. And maybe you've, I'm sure, spoken to some that are like this.
Of course, of course.
Like, how do we deal with that, with those situations and those individuals, and bring those people to a place of love, to a place of healing, etc.?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. So I've not ever shared this publicly before. I went back into a period of depression when I left RBC. So after I came out, I remained in as the EVP, personal and commercial banking, for another 3 years. And we continued to achieve record results, customer loyalty, business growth.
That you stayed in your role,
I did
and
for
you
3 more
came
years.
back, and now you were living as a woman.
I was living as me, the real me.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I meant.
Yeah, no, I was Catherine. I
Yes.
returned, in 2019, I returned to the office on September the 6th as the whole person. And we went on to achieve record results, and right across the board, diversity, our inclusivity scores were like 10 percentage points higher than the corporate average. Customer loyalty was record. Our business growth was strong or leading.
Yeah.
It worked. My life coach at the time, my career coach at the time, says, I don't care what gender you are. I just care that you come back to work as good or better than you were before. And so it was working. Yet I'd been in the job 8 years. My heart had burst open for humanity in the world. I was leading differently. I had developed this love and passion for heart-centered leadership. It was before ESG. I was already building I'm dyslexic, so I build complex mental models. I was already building in my mind a view of leadership for a sustainable world. And then I got to a point where I said, I've got to leave. I need another chapter where I can be chosen or build a full life as Katherine and only Katherine.
Yes.
And I went back into depression because by then I was divorced and living on my own. My children had grown up and left home, and I hadn't really built hobbies because I was a workaholic, working, long hours and 150% of my energy. And then I left RBC. And this happens to a lot of people, especially men, that pour
Yes.
themselves into their career for 30 or 40 years, and then one day it's over.
Yeah.
And I went back into depression. And it was in some ways worse than before I came out, because I had already thought of taking my life, and I had promised myself I wouldn't, because I wanted to be around for another 50 years for my kids. And I
Nice.
grieved and I grieved and I grieved, and I cried in the park for weeks and weeks and weeks, feeling useless because I'd given up my corporate identity. And, this, I believe we're living in a mental health pandemic, given the state of the
I
world.
agree.
Social
Yep.
fracture, economic crisis, planet crisis.
Mhm.
And on top of all of that, we're living with an unprecedented amount of information and disinformation. And it all adds up to severe anxiety and mental health for many of us. And then we mask it with a shopping addiction, a work addiction, whatever it is.
Drugs.
Yeah, anything to cope. And so I have a ton of empathy for anxiety and mental health. I've lived it. And here I had material success, but I
Yes.
still went back into depression. And so my message for anyone, whether you're interacting with that homeless person or you're interacting with an employee who's on leave of absence, who, it's irritating you that they're not at work and getting their tasks done and they're on leave of absence and their doctor just sent you the third note that they're on mental health leave. Fucking find kindness in your heart. You don't know, and I know it's tough to be the boss and have to deliver, and I know you're busy. Just find kindness in your heart because you just don't know their story.
Yeah.
And it fits with probably a segue to a bigger question, Anthony. Is if you can give yourself a gift so you don't go into depression like I did when I left RBC after 37 years, is start now building a whole life. Yeah. Find hobbies, find interests, volunteer at a food, at a soup kitchen. Yep. Like find things to do that open your heart, channel your creative potential. Spend time with children. Don't miss a kid's concert. Like expand your life, shrink your work hours, and expand your life to be more whole and complete so that you're not cutting off your heart from yourself and the world, and that you're living with a level of consciousness and awareness and love for yourself and for others. And it'll be the best thing you do to protect yourself from anxiety and mental health challenges. And don't be afraid to ask for professional help if there's something in you that you've denied, some trauma in you that you've not healed. Like it's the greatest gift you can give yourself to create space, to live more in alignment with your essence and your soul. And it's the greatest gift you can give yourself to get help to heal things that you might have not healed.
Yeah.
And you end up being automatically a kinder, more inclusive, more empathic leader, and you'll be better at your job.
But you'll be better at life. The big challenge to all of that is, unfortunately, we need money. We need to fit into whatever role to get a job, to make money so that we can live. And if money isn't a means to happiness, but money gives you choice to create happiness if you use it wisely. It's not the amount of money that is always a problem. I've noticed so often. Yeah. So, well, I need to why are you working so hard? I want to make $1 million. And I say, well, you're going to fail. You're going to get to $1 million, and then what? You're not going to know what to do.
Yeah, I've got a comment on money.
You need to have purpose. You need to have purpose.
You do. You ultimately.
And too often that's where people are missing. There's no purpose. They're not doing things that matter. Obviously, you got to make money. But if it doesn't matter to those you care about and to the greater good, it's a problem. It'll come home to roost.
It is for sure. And the world that we live in, is an extractive and performative world. It is a materialistic, extractive. We extract value, financial value, human resource value. We extract value,
shareholder value.
Right? And it's performative. It's productivity based. You got to perform. And so it's not male, it's masculine. The business world happens to still be dominated by men, but it's masculine energy, which is linear, logical, mechanical. Feminine energy is more intuitive, more sensitive. Yes.
Empathetic.
It's empathetic, it's creative. Yeah. And every human being has a mixture of feminine and masculine attributes. I just happen to have more pronounced feminine attributes that I've been denying than the average person, the average guy. And so, finding your way to open your heart and to be more whole from your essence or what makes you unique is the first part. And as your heart opens, and you feel, especially in cases like mine and people that have experienced the biggest traumas, if you survive, you feel spared. I feel spared. I
Right.
feel spared. And I live with my heart wide open. And I never want another human being to go through what I went through. And I long for a world that is kind and inclusive and sustainable, a world where we can live in harmony with each other and with nature once again. I long for that. And I know, and I've seen it, I know that deep inside every human being, there are two truths. We can work from fear or survival,
Yeah.
or we can work from nurture or kindness or love. And when we work from survival and extractive ways of being, there's usually winners and losers. You exploit when you work from that place. When you work from love or nurture or kindness, human beings and empathy, human beings tend to come up with more holistic solutions that are more balanced and sustainable.
Yeah.
And so, that's the kind of world, especially now with the wars that we're seeing, and given the state of what I call the four existential crises, given the state of the world, if we don't find our way back to a level of peace and harmony within, and find our way towards more integrated and balanced solutions, whether you're a CEO or a company or a human being or a not-for-profit or a government leader, well, there won't be a humanity. And I think we all know that deep down. So, but it starts with caring for yourself on the inside and becoming that more kind, whole, complete individual. And then as you do that for yourself, you just automatically become kinder and more patient of others, of their journey. And you automatically become more inclusive and you make better decisions. And so I chose to go back into the corporate world after RBC,
Yeah.
following a period of grieving and healing, because Home Equity Bank, the Toronto Star article that recently came out,
Yeah.
Home Equity Bank is a really special company because most aging people, when you're over 50 or 60 and you've left your career or are working part-time, to your point about money, you're worried sick that you're not going to have enough money to live.
Yeah.
And then your sense of dignity starts to shrink and your mental health isn't as good. And everybody tells you, well, sell your house and move into an apartment, but you love your house and you love your neighbors. And
Yeah.
so why I went there, because I knew from after leaving RBC, and I knew from 35 years in retail financial services, that if we can help aging people unlock savings in their home to live a more dignified, independent, and empowered life, it could be a game changer for people.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, I was getting ready to publish my book and I wanted to launch a podcast, kind of my version of an Oprah show. And I had these other creative things that I wanted to do. And I knew I was getting close to 60. I turned 60 a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And I said, okay, I've now done what I need to do in the corporate world. It's time to go live a creative life. And frankly, money was part of it. I needed to make sure that my former spouse would be okay financially, that my kids got through university,
Right.
and that I got to a place as a transgender woman that if I did experience rejection, that I had enough money in the account that I could get to 90 or 95 or 100 years old and be okay. Not wealthy, but okay. And, I got to a point where I feel spared, Anthony. And I'm going to launch a company called Sincerely. And it's all about profiling people's stories of hurt and hardship through to self-love, through to acts of service to humanity in the world. And you get to a point in life where where you have a choice to do what you feel called to do.
Yes.
And that's where I'm at.
We're gonna wrap it up because this has been such a wonderful discussion on so many levels. There's two acronyms that we use extensively here in the corporate world: DEI and ESG.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into all kinds of, we could go into so many different directions, but if you had to give guidance, because
Yeah.
I think that there's been a shift in how the importance of ESG.
Yeah.
But with DEI especially, because that touches on, how we deal with those that are different and how we include those that are different. And I wonder from your perspective, how can we build corporations that are more inclusive, loving, more, win-win-win, I like to say,
Yeah.
and but and do it in a let's say perhaps in a way that's more sincerely. How's that?
That's perfect. And
You like that?
I like it. It's also true.
Yes, I know.
So number one, I'm within Sincerely, there's multiple pillars of the company, and the company
Sure.
will start to go public rather soon, along with the book. There's a research arm, and I'm doing research into performative and extractive societies and leadership, and what I call regenerative and coherent societies and leadership. So there is an evolution of humanity available to us if we choose it. And I've already covered it off. It starts with you slowing down and embracing your own wholeness and doing whatever healing and inner growth is important to you as a person. And everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
And this isn't a program. This isn't a DE&I department or dashboard. This is about humans becoming more coherent and human within themselves. And I believe every human deserves that for themselves. And when you do that, as I've already talked about, you naturally slow down and you become kinder and more inclusive and more curious about other people. And so the problem with DEI is it largely became about a dashboard and about compliance rather than something deeply grounded in humans becoming more human and building that into the culture and the understanding of organizations and leadership, etc. Similarly, ESG, much like DE&I, was a template put on top of a performative and extractive world that wasn't easily integrated, and it became more compliance. And so if I put myself in the shoes of your team, there's the personal journey of each of you as,
Individuals.
members of Veritas, or those of you working in, wealth management or asset management or banks. There's the personal side of the story, but then there's the professional side. Given the state of the world, I would be spending a lot of time on really getting to know deeply the leadership team and the culture of that organization. And is it performative on the surface? Or is it a culture and a leadership team that is on a journey to something that is more whole, more regenerative, more coherent? And, that's the only way in my view, humanity and companies and leadership are going to be able to cope and support us as we evolve to what I hope will be a sustainable world. And do it at a time in Western world history that is going to be full of volatility and full of stress. And so I'm 1000% behind the idea of sustainability or harmony. I'm 1000% behind every human being made up of dimensions of human uniqueness, visible and invisible. And that the more we find inner peace and the more we find patience for one another and behave more thoughtfully and more inclusively, that we will move towards harmony and sustainability. But it's not a department.
And it's not a checklist.
It's
not
not
a checklist. But the problem, and maybe we'll take this up when you start doing some research, the problem is that it's hard to implement things that are not structured. And when you have a group of, think of Royal Bank with 80,000 employees, like this is a difficult thing to do without some structure, because not everybody thinks like perhaps you or I do about the concept of inclusion and the concept of and the empathy that's required. But anyway, I think the point is well taken, and I like the way you framed how it should, the key considerations, right?
Yeah, and it's possible, and
I agree.
You can take this whole discussion and go sit with it and watch it a few times and relate to your own life and take away one or two lessons.
Yes.
And the people I have a lot of empathy for are CEOs. Yes, they're privileged financially and so on, yet the challenge in balancing short, medium, long term, the challenge in seeing the future while delivering short-term performance, the challenge in building a heart-centered, sustainable culture, this challenge of pressure from all your stakeholders, like it's massive. So, but it starts at the top. It starts with us as CEOs caring for our own well-being and becoming a more integrated human being and a more coherent human being.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Thank you.
Uncle, that was Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
All right, my two, of course, we're going to leave with our two most important, not most important, but very important questions. One is, tell us a book that shaped your thinking. I often leave it open, but I think given how important leadership and identity has been to you, perhaps a book that you've read or two that's helped frame that, or a book that you'd like to recommend.
Yeah, two of them. So my favorite business book of all times is The Fifth Discipline, written by Peter Senge. I read it in 2009, and it changed the way I looked at leadership. It was about hiring amazing human beings that had done a lot of healing and establishing a vision and a mission for the team and the company, and becoming a systems thinker, somebody who could think 3, 4, and 5 orders of magnitude down the path and see the whole puzzle. Amazing book, Peter Senge, and amazing human being. And then the other one was the first book I read while I was experiencing depression in January, February of 2023, which is Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. And Michael Singer's a phenomenal healer and spiritual leader and entrepreneur. And Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, is the book that opened up my heart, and I began to meditate and calm my nervous system. And I have Michael Singer to thank for that.
Good. I've read that book too. It's a good one. Very good. Not the other one though. I'm going to get that one.
Yeah.
So, and then your favorite breakfast on a day you need clarity. How's that? And perhaps a recommended breakfast restaurant.
Oh my God.
Because I love Prince Edward County where you are.
Oh, there's tons. This is like in the top 10 lists of places to visit in the world.
Yeah.
And for food. And Jamie Kennedy's become a dear friend of mine. And, but in Toronto, my favorite food place for breakfast is Mars, just north of Yonge and Eglinton. Amazing. Yeah. I used to go there with my kids on the way to school. And it doesn't give me clarity. It gives me comfort. is bacon and eggs. And my brother-in-law, my brother from another mother, and I would fry bacon in the pan, and then
then
we
cook
put
the
the eggs
eggs.
right in the grease, and we do them, and then
That's how I do it too.
and we called it the health flexor. So it's not clarity, but it's damn good comfort food.
Nice. And cook that, let that bacon fat really get hot. So when you put the egg in, it gets crunchy. Because I like to have it a little crunchy. And then I take the fat and pour it on top of the egg so that the white cooks, but the yolk is still runny. All
You
right,
got
we'll
it.
have that one day, Catherine. Thanks.
Go buy the
Beautiful.
book.
I
Everybody,
we need
go
to,
buy the
okay.
book.
Thanks, Catherine. All the best. God bless.
See ya. Bye. Take care.